These 6 individuals have made a choice to work, a choice to sacrifice, put themselves on the line, represent you, this high school. This is your team.
Hoosiers. They needed a second chance to finish first.
Well, welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the championship game.
You're not the new coach.
Are you expecting somebody different?
Younger.
Most incredible and improbable confrontation.
Well, those of you who don't know, my name is Norman Dale. I coached college ball for 10 years, but it's been 12 years since I've blown this.
In the illustrious history of the Indiana High School basketball tournament.
That's a hell of a team you had there.
You knew that team?
I know everything there is to know about the greatest game ever.
Hey everybody, it's the Cannon Cruisers. I'm JD.
And I'm Randy, and you're listening to another exciting edition of our bonus feature where we continue to check out sports films from the 80s.
Well, we also started in the 70s.
And the 70s, and ending in the 90s.
But what are we ending with? Who knows? You'll just have to wait and see. Although I guess today we're technically still doing another 80s movie, so why...
Yeah, where we checked out the 1986-87 release of Hoosiers.
That's right, Randy. This is a very popular movie among certain circles.
Just in general, it's considered a very well-received and very well-regarded, critically acclaimed even film, starring Gene Hackman, Barbara Hershey, and Dennis Hopper.
It's even influential, you might say.
And has been labeled by the Library of Congress as being culturally, historically, or aesthetically significant.
Yeah, I could definitely see that. Much like when we did the other one, we did the baseball movie.
The Natural. Also featuring Barbara Hershey.
It has a lot of similarities with that, because there's a lot of things in this movie that would literally show up in other movies of this sort afterwards. Because a lot of stuff was not nailed down by this point.
Have you seen a sports movie in the 90s? You can trace some of its DNA right back to this film here.
Yes, you can.
Especially if it was based on a true story.
Oh yeah, definitely, because those weren't very common at the time. So, Randy, what is Hoosiers about exactly?
Oh, yes, I should have known. It tells the story of a small-town Indiana high school who brings in a big city coach from the colleges who hasn't actually coached for like 12 years for reasons that we'll get into. They bring him in to coach their basketball team to the nationals or to the big state championships.
Yeah, and the entire movie is the journey from when he arrives up to when they win at the end of the movie. I guess that's a spoiler, but I mean, that's the type of movie
And
it is.
according to IMDb and to Wikipedia, it is inspired in part, it's not in wholly, in part by the Milan High School team who won the 1954 state championship. So a very tiny high school rises up.
It's based on a true story in the actual sense of the term based on a true story. Based on.
And it's a very crowd-pleasing film, and it's a very...
Well, you might as well just go straight into it, Randy. What were your general impressions of Hoosiers?
You see the DNA. You see the DNA that goes into more modern basketball movies, more modern sports movies in general.
You could see a lot of Air Bud in this movie. That's what you're trying to say.
Yes, you can, including Air Bud 2.
But there wasn't anything in the rules that said the dog could play basketball in this movie.
Well, JD, there is a character named Buddy.
Well, there is, yes. That's probably where they got it from.
And so, yeah, in all its seriousness, you can see the DNA of every single sports movie of the 90s in this film.
Yes.
There's certain, how you say, beats that it hits throughout the film that are hit in all these other films.
Though in this one, I guess it feels a bit more, I don't know, less like they're hitting beats and just like a natural story. Because a lot of those movies you watch, like, okay, this is the part where this has to happen, and this is the part where this part has to happen. This one, it just kind of feels like a story with things happening.
It all naturally happens when it should.
It doesn't feel as much of a formula, even though it's obviously led to a formula.
Yeah.
It doesn't feel very formula.
So, yes, this Gene Hackman plays the coach, Norman Dale, and it becomes the archetype that is used in these other films. This curmudgeon this hard, tough coach.
Yes.
A little volatile.
Everybody has to understand where he's coming from and what he's trying to do because he knows what he's doing.
Take a salt tablet. And he just basically becomes this lovable coach that everybody on his team loves by the end.
And in the town even, too, because he has to convince everybody.
Even though the town disliked him. And then I had mentioned that Dennis Hopper appears in this film. Mm-hmm. He won Best Supporting Actor from as an Oscar in the year this movie was released.
Could see why. He was really good in it.
Which he got for it because the movie was released in 86, so he got his award in 87.
Technically it was 87, but, regardless.
The reason why we keep going back and forth on that is JD doesn't want to say we watched too many movies in 86 when this movie is technically an 86 film, but had a Canadian release in 87.
Yeah, but it's more known for being an 87 movie. So
no, it's not!
Yes, it is.
No, it's not. Yes, it is. Stop lying to the audience. It's a 1986 film. Get over it.
So, Randy, what were your positives from Hoosiers from 1987?
The music,
Randy really
the Academy. No, actually, JD really liked the music because he kept humming the damn theme over and over again as it was going through.
It was a very catchy theme.
Also, you have to call out the performances of everybody in this film, because they did a lot with very little.
Yeah, because it's a small town. There's not a very big cast, so there's only so many people you can use.
And the focus isn't on the individual with this movie, as is the coaching. It is more on how the team dynamics work, instead of it being all about, Jimmy, who's the hot shot in the town that everybody wants to go back to basketball. And who the kid characters are. Buddy, Everett, Strip, and Ollie, them. Yeah. But that isn't the focus on them as individuals.
No, it's how they come together as a team. There's one of the central scenes near the beginning of the movie is when he's talking to Jimmy because everybody, obviously, he's the best player in the team. You have to get him on the team. So he basically goes out there and has a little conversation with him, but it doesn't go the way you might think it does.
Because literally at the end of it, he tells him, he's like, I don't care if you play basketball on our team or if you just focus on your schooling. It's do whatever's good for you.
I don't really care. I'm not going to force you to be on this team because it's not about that. Because there was even the scene after that where they introduced the team and the crowd starts saying, we want Jimmy. We want Jimmy. And then he just steps up and says, well, this is the team you have. Support this team. Yeah,
exactly. And it's called Hoosiers because that's what they refer to basketball players in Indiana. Mm-hmm. And because it's such a big sport there. Yeah. It's so important to them culturally as Indianans.
Yep. It's a very strong sense of local pride, because a lot of the beginning of the movie just comes together about how important a team is to work together, but also how the community has to work together. And when they're all on the same side, they're all doing well and they're all winning and they're doing their best. And even when some of them struggle, like
Shooter, played by Dennis Hopper, who is the father of one of the kids. He's also an alcoholic.
Even when he's struggling, though, he's still trying to be part of the group,
and he knows a lot about the sport and about the history of it, and
he ends up contributing quite a lot.
Yeah, he even goes. For lack of a better word, sober. I was going to say go straight, but he gets on the straight and narrow so that he can support his son while also contributing to the team as assistant coach, which he does. Mm-hmm. And you even see the son start to forgive him, and because he's part of the team.
Yeah, they all come together to help each other out, and even by the end of the movie, he's trying to get sober for his family and for himself and for the team. So, that's the big theme of the movie, and that's probably my highlight of the film, because I really like how every part of it pretty much comes together to focus on that, which is the coach's
lessons that he's trying to teach them, that it's not about the individual, that it's that, I don't care.
Not about the hot shot.
It's not about the hot shot. It's like, you aren't all doing this for yourselves, you're doing this for each other.
Yep, and to do that, you have to be the best you can be. And that's the whole thing. Everybody contributes and brings it to a head And it all comes together at the final game when pretty much every player, every character ends up doing something valuable by the end.
Yeah.
Pretty much all of them. Which I would say is definitely the strong point of the movie. It really emphasizes the sports theme as part of the theme of the film.
Yes.
So now we got to get into the other side of it.
Yeah, now we have to go in for the negatives of the movie. I'm going to start grasping at straws here, and I'm going to kind of go, let's say, the romance between Gene Hackman and Barbara Hershey's character, Myra, is a little bit... Didn't have a lot of time to breathe. It's like they really only had like maybe 4 scenes to actually establish that there was something going on there and resolve their romantic entanglement. Like there felt like there should have been a little bit more in that.
Well, that's because there was.
That's because there was. That's kind of what I was beating around the bush. That okay, so the movie is
it's 2 hours long. Basically,
2 hours long. You don't really notice that it's 2 hours long.
No, it's a pretty quick movie.
Currently available on Tubi, which was very surprising with how many commercials they had on it. Not a lot.
Not a lot. You'd figure they would have more.
But
no.
the director, who I forgot to mention at the onset, David Anspaugh, and his co-writer, Angelo Pizzo, had timed the movie. The final cut was roughly 2 hours and 50 minutes, maybe, give or take, like almost 3 hours long. And what they had to sacrifice to get the movie under 2 hours, just barely under 2 hours.
Just barely, yeah.
By the studio standards, is they had to sacrifice a lot of the relationship between Myra and I forgot Norman, like Gene Hackman and Barbara Hershey.
Yeah.
They had to sacrifice a lot of one of the players trying to get back into the team after he left the team. They sacrificed a lot of scenes with him, and they sacrificed scenes with Dennis Hopper, which honestly he was the best of the whole movie. Like acting wise, he did put on a show for but
yeah.
Because of these cuts, the negatives of the film, it's grasping at straws because
I would like more of that. Is basically
that's what it is. It's that it's missing, and then when you find out that okay, so these weaknesses in the film, like in the actual story structure in the story, is because of a studio mandate to get this movie under 2 hours.
Yeah. Although I will say, in its defense on that part, is when you said there were cut scenes, like, oh, there must be a lot of stuff we didn't actually see, like completely removed things. No, it's actually stuff we already get. It's just more of it.
Yeah, it's more stuff that basically elaborates on it.
It's not like they gutted the film of anything. It's just more like they shortened it instead of.
They shortened it, and some of the stuff that was cut out basically made those plot lines a little undercooked. Like I completely forgot. Like basically how they resolved the movie and Buddy was to get back to film was his father just going, "Yeah, he'll listen to your rules," and that was it.
Yeah, there probably could have been more of that. Though maybe, hopefully, one day we might get an extended cut, who knows? But for the movie that it is, it still works very well. I was very surprised that, because I've heard a lot about this movie over the years, and I figured, okay, it must have started a lot of sports trends, so there must be something about it. And it's much like The Natural in that it kind of feels like its own thing. It doesn't really... I didn't really watch this and compare it to other sports movies. It kind of feels like its own individual thing.
So to elaborate on that thought, JD, what were some of the trends, like to go further into this, that it did inspire in other sports movies?
Well, like you can see it mostly in the 90s, mostly again with kind of the biopic sports things, but that's not as obvious in this film. It's when like there's people who actually were alive, obviously, so they go out of their way to sort of frame them, like where they came from, how it affects the story going forward. In this movie, you kind of do that with the coach a little bit. And when you learn more about him, you learn more about his particularities. Normally, when it's not based on something like that, it's just kind of vague. You know what I mean? It's just kind of like, yeah, I guess he had some troubles some time in his past. It's not
like the 90s movie that it most specifically reminds me of, hockey-wise, is Mystery Alaska.
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah, like that one, if you think about that one follows beat for beat the same beats as Hoosiers.
When you hear like, okay, biographical sports movie, you pretty much know more or less what it's going to be. And a lot of that kind of started here, but I wouldn't describe this movie as one of those, because again, it just sort of feels like its own thing. It kind of stands alone but it is influential for what happens later on, a lot like some of the other ones we covered.
And the one thing that this movie does differently than the other movies is that his big speech that he gives doesn't happen at the end of the movie. Mm-hmm. It actually happens earlier on when he's basically giving his vision for what he wants the team to be.
Yeah, and it kind of gets echoed a bit as the film goes along in different ways instead of having it just be like the culmination, which is a very big sports movie trope is when you get to the end and the coach just says, all right, we took so long to get here, now let me remind you of the themes of the movie.
Yeah, though the final shot of the film does bring back the parts of that speech and then ends it with, I love you guys.
Yeah, it just shows the shot of them.
It surely pans in to show a kid having been inspired by the winnings. Mm-hmm. And we don't know how many years later it is.
We don't know.
He's just shooting balls in the gym. And it slowly pans up as we get his big speech again in voiceover. And it pans up to show the Indiana championship shots of the team with the trophy, and it ends with him telling that I love you guys.
It's like showing how it resonated from that point into however long the future is, basically. It's not like in that point in time, it's more like it goes beyond that into wherever time the movie actually is end at the end, if it's a time jump or whatever. Regardless, it kind of is its own thing in the end, I'd say. Mm-hmm. So, we might as well get into that. We already did positives and negatives. So, what would you give Hoosiers, Randy?
Well, it's like I must have mellowed a little bit with age because usually I'm a little bit, I used to be like very strict, like, no, I don't give 5s out for everything. Mm-hmm. But now it's kind of like I'm grasping at straws to give a negative for the film. Mm-hmm. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah. I did too.
Quite a bit, actually. Like I said, it's the performances in this film is great. By all the actors. So I would give this film, and specifically just because there's nothing really negative, and it doesn't really feel like it's really lacking anything. I would give it a 5.
Yeah,
there's a reason that this movie is so highly respected and so pivotal to film, I guess you'd say, to the genre.
Yeah. So that was like when we watched The Natural, there's this sort of vibe or energy around the movie, like when it started, that didn't really dissipate until the movie ended. Like whether it's the cinematography or the music or the acting or the story itself, the way it all kind of comes together to form a story very specific to itself. Even if it is influential with what came later, it's still very much original and very much just this. The whole time I was just like watching it, was engrossed from beginning to end. I don't really have much in the way of complaints. Like I could nitpick, you can always nitpick, but to find a real serious flaw with this, I can't really do it, so I have to give it a 5 too.
Would you say the film's a flawless movie?
It's pretty close, especially for the type of film it is. When you come to sports movies, there's very specific things you come for. Obviously, you want to see the sport. But what I think, to me, tends to separate the better sports movies apart from the older one is how the sport affects the actual construction of the movie itself on a fundamental level. So the ones we've given 5s to so far, the sport is kind of the point, but it also goes beyond the sport, and at the same time, the sport kind of wraps itself into the structure of the film.
It's a Mobius strip of intention and
you can't separate them.
Yeah.
And it kind of brings the whole thing up into a way that even if you watched another movie about the sport, you would not get the same experience. And I'm pretty sure this is that movie for basketball, because I can't really think of another one that would hit this sort of groove for the sport.
And I know I've seen basketball movies like Air Bud. Yeah. Actually, I've never seen Air Bud, if you want to know the truth.
Really? I'm surprised at that. But yeah, there's a few of them. Like I said, like The Longest Yard was very, very specific to itself in a way even the remake couldn't do. They had the same thing with Bad News Bears, is the same sort of thing. Though it was influential, what came later, it's still very much, you can't really do that again. Even if they remade it, which they did, it's not quite the same.
They sequelized it, TVized it, and then they made a remake of it.
And despite that, the original still stands out.
Whereas this one has never had a remake.
Even if this one had a remake, I don't think they would be able to match it. There's just, like I said, there's a quality there that's just from go to end. It's there. I don't even know how to say it beyond that. It's kind of a feeling you get, I guess. I don't really know what else to say.
There isn't much to say.
It's just a really good movie.
Yeah, like I said, it's like that's what I was saying. Is it a flawless movie? It's like, yeah, it's pretty
perfect. Close.
It's almost perfect as a movie.
Especially for a sports movie, I couldn't really think of a whole lot that would be better than this one. Especially if you want to give suggestions to people for sports movies to watch, I would put this one on the list for sure.
Oh yeah, for sure. And just kind of add in that we do a lot of bad movies.
Oh yeah.
We've done a lot of bad movies because of the nature of the podcast.
Yeah.
But this run of sports movies we've done, it's kind of phenomenal of like some of these movies, like how good these ones are. And we're not really being picky. We're literally choosing whatever we can find for the year to get the sports in.
We're also trying to trace a bit of a line from, like I said.
And try to do ones that aren't normally done as much, but also ones that are done. Like this one, we know people have talked about Hoosiers a lot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And honestly, we're probably not adding anything to the conversation other than go, yeah, no, this is a really good movie and you should watch it.
I think it works in conversation with the other sports movies we've done. Like I said, we started with the earliest we could find, which was The Longest Yard, and we've kind of picked them out a little bit. So you get oddballs like, let's say, Rollerball, which is just completely out.
It's a sports movie, a fictional sports movie, yeah.
And then you get like this. So, like, you get all across the map. Some are funnier, some are more serious, some are more invested in the sport than others, but they're all pretty unique.
And to be honest, I actually was confusing this movie with something else.
Which one?
Well, originally, because I didn't know the meaning of the word Hoosiers. I for some reason, my brain thought it was Slapshot.
Oh, yeah.
Slapshot. And I thought Slapshot was something else altogether.
Oh, yeah.
But I forgot where I was going with this.
Yeah.
I thought that this was a comedy. Like I thought we was coming in, it was going to be a sports comedy.
Oh yeah. Oh, it's
a sports drama.
It's a drama, and it's a very unique one and a very good one. Very well worth watching even today.
Now we're just repeating ourselves. So
that's
with that,
we'll see you next time when we continue our cruise through the sports movie catalog. Goodbye.
Goodbye.
I know everything there is to know about the greatest game ever invented.
With a pint size hardly big enough for 3 syllables, Hickory Huskers, enrollment 64.
Out of here, right now.
You kicking me out?
Yes, don't come back until you learn to keep your mouth shut and listen.
Take on the defending state champions, the Mighty Bears of South Bend Central.
Run you off the boards.
You got to squeeze them back in the paint. Make them chuck it from the cheap seats.
Already calling this the game of the century.
I've seen them, the real sad ones. They sit around the rest of their lives talking about the glory days.
News people from all over the Midwest are here to witness Hoosierland's version of the Cinderella story.
It's got to work out this time, or that's it for good.
The starting lineup for the Huskers.
Well, my boys only know basketball, farming, and school.
A basketball hero around here is treated like a god.
You know, most people would kill to be treated like a god just for a few moments.
Forget about the crowds, the size of the school, their fancy uniforms, and remember what got you here. If you put your effort and concentration into playing to your potential, to be the best that you can be, I don't care what the scoreboard says at the end of the game, in my book, we're going to be winners.
Let's win this and for all the small schools who never had a chance to get here.
I love you guys.
Gene Hackman, Barbara Hershey, Dennis Hopper. Hoosiers. They needed a second chance to finish first.